I'd like to welcome you. I'm Michael Howe, the President of RUSI New South Wales. I'd like to pay our respects, and in particular our respects to those of First Nations who have served, are serving or are contemplating service. And again, we'd just like to offer our respects to the traditional owners of the country. I'd like to immediately go into showing you what, at our 134th birthday party on the 18th of August, we called our our pantheon, our range of past presidents. And we have attempted to honour them by presenting them with a plaque. And if you look at the next slide, we have presented most of our presidents who were able to be with us on the 134th in August with that plaque, but Bob had managed to get himself to Scandinavia on that particular date and time, and we thought it was a little excessive to ask for an airfare back. So we acknowledge the fact that Air Vice Marshal Bob Treloar, who by the way has a most distinguished record in the Royal Australian Air Force, in the context of honouring Bob as our past president from the period 2007 to 2010, not only did he have a very distinguished service record with the Royal Australian Air Force, including service in Vietnam and mentioned in dispatches for that service, but he then became an advisor of a technical nature and was a RUSI counsellor. We then changed the governance to a board, and Bob remains a counsellor emeritus of the Institute, and he was our president from 2012 to 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to firstly invite Bob to receive a plaque from us in honouring his service as past president, and then I invite him to, key word here, Bob, briefly, speak to you. And ladies and gentlemen, Air Vice Marshal Bob Treloar. Bob, it's my great honour to be able to give you this. Thank you so much for your past service, and thank you for your dedication. We really appreciate it. And this is one of those spontaneous photograph events.
We're both smiling.
So Bob, thank you. If you'd like to,
thank you.
Very briefly.
Yes, I got the word briefly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I had the great honour of being the president from 2007 to 10 of this fine institute. And which goes back a few years now, I'm afraid to say, but my memory of that particular period was working with a team of really good people who voluntarily gave their time, their energy, their intellect to this institute to make it better and to improve it, and they did so. At the time we were moving into the age of digitisation, and we then decided we'd put together a website. It took us a little while to do that, but with the good work from John Howes at the back of the room, who's still around and doing work on the website, we introduced and developed the website. It was a job that was carried on then by Doug Rosa, the president, who followed me, and then David Lease behind him. And our website's gone from strength to strength, I think you would agree. It was well overdue when I became president, and it was one of my conditions of presidency that we would develop a website. And I must have been desperate because they said yes, and we did just the same thing. The advantages were manifest. I mean, we managed to put all of our membership together instead of the paper cards, which were run in an index box, onto a computer. We knew where people were. We could update their details. Things like listing today's lecture program. We started with that. And I note on the website that we're still doing that, so people can go back and see who's spoken, when they've spoken, and in some cases review their particular addresses. All of that was a fairly exciting time, and I must say, and I'll say again, I was very proud to be the president, and I'm very grateful to see that this organisation has kept continuing to improve in the last 20 years, and its improvement and its relevance to our community continues, and for that I'm grateful. I'm very proud to be a member of your organisation. Thank you.
And again, our thanks to Bob for his service to his country and to RUSI. It's my pleasure to now just begin the process of introducing our guest speaker, but we are growing a very significant relationship with the University of Newcastle. The Vice-Chancellor, Professor Alex Zielinski, AO, presented at our seminar last year, and we have deliberately been encouraging a growing relationship. And as part of that, I'd like to initially acknowledge the presence with us of Professor Diane Willey. Diane, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Diane is Dean of Engineering at the University of Newcastle, and we've been talking with her and other senior people about the ways that the RUSI network that we can access might assist some of the work of the university, particularly with our Library of National Military Significance, and also the opportunity through our vice patrons to start finding projects that are of importance but not necessarily of large scale, which is very important for young students, for example, coming through the university qualification. And I have to own up that my engineering degree is from the University of Newcastle. There's no bias here at all. It's now my great pleasure to introduce very briefly, and more importantly, hand over to our event coordinator, Ron Lyons, our guest speaker, Professor Vijay. And Vijay, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for travelling down and being with us. My role has nearly ended in the sense that I'll thank you at the end, but I'd like to introduce our event coordinator, Lieutenant Colonel Ron Lyons, who will introduce properly. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 7th in our lecture series for 2022. The overall theme for our activities this year has been Improving Australia's Regional Security, and the title of today's lecture is AUKUS, Cyber Security Aspects. It'll be presented by Professor Vijay Varadharajan, holder of the Global Innovation Chair in Cyber Security at the University of Newcastle. Vijay also heads the Advanced Cyber Security Engineering Research Centre at the university. He's held a number of academic, scientific and consultant advisory positions both here in Australia and around the world. Among these are the Prime Minister of India's Cyber Security Task Force, the Australian Government's peak security advisory body, the IT Security Expert Advisory Group. He's been an expert in cyber security for the European Union and consultant for the United Kingdom Board of Trade. Advanced cyber is one of the key advanced capabilities of the AUKUS agreement in strengthening cyber capabilities, including protecting critical communications and operations systems. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the podium our speaker, Professor Vijay Varadharajan.
Thank you. First, let me acknowledge the country. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I would like to thank Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security, and of course I would like to thank Professor Michael Howe and Lieutenant Colonel Ron Lyons for this opportunity to speak with you. I really appreciate this, and I'm delighted to be here. We all know that AUKUS is a trilateral. Let me move the slide. We all know that AUKUS is a trilateral security pact between Australia, UK, and the US, announced in September 2021. Under this pact, Australia will acquire nuclear-powered submarines from the UK and the US. But AUKUS is much more than nuclear-powered submarines. It's much broader than that, with a focus on the security of the Indo-Pacific region. Both our PMs, Prime Ministers, before and after the recent election, have referred to AUKUS as being a comprehensive agreement covering interoperability of defense assets between the partners. The pact is intended to include cooperation on advanced technologies such as cyber, artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and quantum technologies. And the focus is more on the military and defense capabilities rather than the intelligence sharing alliance, which includes, of course, in the Five Eyes with Canada and New Zealand. There have been several statements in the public media about AUKUS. AUKUS will enable game-changing technology transfer, potentially creating opportunities not only for Australian defense, but for Australian businesses in general, for instance, in the context of regulatory frameworks, both within the country as well as between the partners. So in this talk, I would like to explore the following aspects. In particular, I would like to explore the role of cyber and the aspects of cyber which could, and in my view, should be part of AUKUS. First, I want to start off with a brief strategic context of the Indo-Pacific. It has become a highly competitive environment, we know, with a lot of tension and assertive posture by one country, namely China, in the recent times. Then we will look at the implications of the strategic circumstances on cybersecurity. Here, I want to introduce the technology context, and in particular, the unique challenges posed by cyber. This leads to my third part of my talk, which is the role of cyber in certain disruptive technologies. Here, I want to particularly look at critical infrastructures, autonomous systems, and space, as well as artificial intelligence. I believe these areas are particularly relevant when it comes to interoperability of defense assets, which was flagged by the Prime Minister in his recent announcement of defense review. Finally, in concluding remarks, I would like to briefly return back to the strategic level and look at how cybersecurity activities can be leveraged across different initiatives such as the Quad and AUKUS. So, moving to the strategic context of the Indo-Pacific first, a major driver is the strategic competition between the US and China here. We have been witnessing a more assertive behavior from China in the recent times in advancing its strategic preferences and seeking to exert a greater influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Such activities range from increased espionage and interference to enforcing economic levers to the potential establishment of military bases in the region. Several of these activities are facilitated by cyber technologies. The strategic competition between the US and China is unlikely to abate. And in fact, with the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, and with the recent tension in Taiwan, this competition has sharpened even more. If one looks at the general trend in the region, it is fair to say that there has been an acceleration of modernization of military, which has been enabled by a period of economic growth. Though the pandemic has probably slowed down this military modernization, it is likely this will be continued to be prioritized. Such regional military modernization includes like advancement of maritime surveillance, which clearly has implications for the Australian operations in the region. New weapons being introduced into the region have increased range, speed, precision, and lethality, potentially placing Australian military forces at greater risk over longer distances. This brings me to another major factor, namely disruptive technologies, which is influencing the strategic context. These disruptive technologies are being translated into sophisticated weapon systems, such as autonomous systems, reducing decision times and improving lethality. This also gives opportunities for non-state actors, such as potential terrorists, to adapt new technologies for their purposes. All these have implications for security and the peace in the region. Growing regional military capabilities, the speed at which they can be deployed, imply reduced warning times. Reduced warning times in turn imply defense plans can no longer assume that they will have time to gradually adjust military capability and preparedness in response to the emerging challenges. Furthermore, such strategic circumstances with greater competition between the major powers in the region have increased the potential for miscalculation and their adverse consequences. All these are putting strain on the rule-based order, which has been the cornerstone of foreign policies for many years. This is being further exacerbated with developments in domains such as space and cyber. In these domains, rules of engagement are not always clear. The thresholds for triggering a military response are often confusing, and they lack the more clearly defined boundaries of national borders. Let us now look at more carefully at the implications for cybersecurity. When it comes to cyber, the strategic context provides the opportunity for increasing willingness by some countries and non-state actors to use the cyber capabilities maliciously. At a broad level, cyber attacks directly compromise the military capability and operations. They drive disinformation with a destabilizing interference to the society and to the economy and political systems. They are often conducted in ways designed to facilitate deniability and complicate attribution. And cyberspace transcends borders, making it easier for attackers and rogue states to carry out these attacks. Before we look at these in more detail, I would like to discuss the technology scenery where cybersecurity fits in. This will also help us to set the scene for arguing why certain cyber technology areas should be considered as an integral part of the AUKUS initiative. Okay, so starting with the scenery, it is clear that technology is pervasive, and so is cybersecurity. Anywhere there is technology, there are issues of security, trust, and privacy. If we look at the scenery, then we have different types of networks: mobile networks, wireless networks, fixed networks. We have distributed services, systems, and cloud services, such as cloud services. We have mobile software, such as the mobile applications. We have small devices, sensors to Internet of Things, IoT, and we have large-scale data structures, infrastructures, and distributed databases. Each one of these technologies have several security, privacy, and trust requirements. In fact, we have a spaghetti of these technologies putting in a heterogeneous pot and creating what I call here pervasive mobile distributed information environment. Then there are users. Users are not a monolith either. They are also heterogeneous. We have individual users, SMEs, small to medium enterprises, small medium enterprises, big corporation, and government agencies. They all have different requirements. So finding security and trust and privacy solutions in this heterogeneous, distributed, pervasive environment is not always that easy. In fact, one of the main roles of a technologist is to provide users with timely, accurate, reliable information and services that he or she or organizations can use to help to improve the quality of the services they offer, and more generally, quality of life in general. Now, if I look at a little bit down, one level down, more specifically looking at the trends, I see there are three clear trends which has been happening for the last decade. This diagram, actually, I put it about 2010. So there is the cloud technologies, IoT, and the big data. This intersection is giving a lot of opportunities for the cyber world, technology world, as well as challenges. At a high level, cybersecurity is the application of technologies, processes, controls to protect systems, network, devices, data, and users from threats and attacks. And security is relative. It is relative to perceived threats. And threats continuously evolve. They are dynamic. So there is need for secure systems to continuously be updated to counteract these emerging threats. So we can think of threats as possible attacks on some systems or digital assets. Threats exploit vulnerabilities. the V in this diagram. And the vulnerabilities materialize as risks. And there's always reduced risk because not only threats change continuously, what happens is there is no such, they are relative to the environment you are in, so context dependent. So there is no such thing as absolute security. So when it comes to changing threats, I tend to think of increasing threat velocity. And there are multiple dimensions to this threat velocity. There are more and more vulnerabilities are being discovered in the technology world because as more and more products in the initial technology scenery, you saw all this interaction of various technologies. So there are more vulnerabilities in the products, in the systems, and therefore potential for more attacks. Then there is evolving set of actors, bad guys. We'll see that a little more later. And then the attacks can happen sooner and faster, so you don't get time to respond effectively. So these are zero-day attacks. You don't have time to come up with the solutions, mitigations. And the attacks happening pretty easily with sophisticated attacks because there are several tools, advanced tools, technologies available to ordinary users to conduct these attacks. And there are several reasons why these vulnerabilities actually happen. They can be product vulnerabilities. They can be misconfigurations, like perhaps what yesterday or day before in the Optus environment, as far as from the information we know, and to insider threats, to social engineering. These are sort of very, very common reasons why you have these vulnerabilities. And there can be different actors. The actors can range from individuals to hacker groups to corporate espionage to advanced state actors. So as you go more through the x-axis, they are able to achieve their objective. That means they are more effective because they have more and more resources as you go up the y-axis. So on the right-hand corner with advanced state actors, they are more effective, and because they have resources, they have the patience to wait, and they persevere, and they do what is called the APT, Advanced Persistence Threats attacks. The attackers also have some advantages just over a defender. So for instance, defender must defend at all points, whereas the attacker can choose the weakest point. Defender can only defend against known attacks, whereas the attackers can probe for unknown vulnerabilities. That's the zero-day attacks. Defender must be constantly vigilant, 24/7, 365 days a year. Attacker can choose the time he or she wants to attack, strike at will. And defender generally play by the rules. Attackers do not have to do that. But there's another problem, attribution. When the attack happens, the question we ask is who is attacking or why, the motivation, the intent behind the attack. And that is not always easy. Even in the present circumstances with what is happening in the Optus world. This is a difficult problem because of there are many reasons. One is open, authenticated nature of the internet. Although we have authenticated meaning you can identify the source of a request or a transaction, but not whole of internet you have this mechanism. Internet is a bunch of collection of networks put together. Information relating to your source may not exist or even accurate. So when an attacker, he or she may attack the system, but then the resources he used to attack will be deleted, erased, probably leaving no or very little trace. People with relevant data may be reluctant to share. So even if I know certain data with this event happened here or there may be legal constraints because there are multiple jurisdictions, so they may be reluctant to share. Even when data is shared, there may be still hard to reach consensus as to what the data actually means. So in this world of cyber world, we always talk about probabilities. What is the right probability threshold that we can tolerate? What is the right level of tolerance? And what action is proportionate? Because we don't know exactly when the attack is going to happen or happened, or what is the effect of that, and therefore what type of response we should do when we should do. So these are all probabilistic and threshold in advanced attacks. challenges in the cyber comes from a variety of factors. One is the heterogeneous technological platform ecosystem that I talked about, with multiple technologies, multiple platforms in each of these technologies, multiple products in each of these platforms, multiple vendors providing products in each of these platforms in multiple technologies. All of that have to interoperate for satisfying different users who have different requirements. So that is a heterogeneous world. Then the attackers, I said, the diversity of attackers, they may have different motivation and intent and resources and their effectiveness. Attack detection itself, though some attacks such as denial of service, distributed denial of service are easy to detect, there are other attacks which go deep into systems, and they are often stealthy and they may not be detected that easily, and or maybe only be detected when they have actually invaded the systems or even taken the data, stolen the data from that already been done. Then only you're able to detect those attacks after the event. And then attribution is a problem, and because we're not able to, the attribution is probabilistic, this compounds the problem of deterrence, because as the premise of deterrence by punishment requires the ability to identify the attacker. And the deterrence difficulty, because of lack of attribution, increases the effectiveness of ICT. Because of the technology being pervasive, the effectiveness of the attacks is become pervasive because of the the lack of attribution, which increases the difficulty of deterrence. And of course, then the attacker's advantage that I talked about. So furthermore, cybersecurity is a multifaceted. Although I talk about technology, in fact, in all the problems that I have been, whether it's in the company like whereas at Hewlett-Packard or Microsoft, in my previous lives, or even in the various projects that I've done, it has aspects of technology, it has aspects of business, different business requirements, and it has social and legal aspects. There's legal aspects as well, as more and more with respect to how, whether it is to do with data breaches or whether it is to attack detection, there are lots of legal issues involved here. So cybersecurity is a multifaceted field. Yeah. So now I'm going to move it to level down. That is, I'm going to look at some specific technologies, and I mentioned that there are 4 areas I'm going to look at, and then we will see what type of challenges happen in each of the technologies which are relevant to AUKUS. Okay, so yeah. The first area is critical infrastructures, and these are infrastructures used to provide vital services. So here I want to focus primarily on 5G infrastructures, which is basically connects everything and anything to the internet, creating potentially diabolical cybersecurity risks. In the AI and cyber, I want to look at cyber impacts on AI, particularly how the AI algorithms themselves can be cheated and attacked. And then in the cyber in unmanned autonomous systems such as drone and underwater submarines is becoming increasingly significant in current conflicts and in current and future conflicts will be. And then with space, with the increasing commercialization and militarization of space, its attractiveness as a target for adversaries is growing in scope and variety. Consequently, cybersecurity for space is a highly strategic issue. So let's start with critical infrastructures. Stay there for a moment. So the 2020 Australian Critical Infrastructure Amendment Bill refers to some 10 sectors as critical: financial services, data storage and processing, which is data centers, cloud, defense, higher education. We are part of critical infrastructure, energy, food and grocery, healthcare, space, transport, and water and utilities. Yeah. But it is interesting to note telecommunication is not part of this critical infrastructure. This is one of very much a current interest as of today, as of now, in the last few days. So when this bill was put through, telcos who enjoy a special role for a variety of reasons, they argued that they have the cybersecurity capabilities. They do not want to be. They want an exemption. And that is the reason why we see this critical infrastructure does not include companies like Optus and Telstra. Anyway, these are assets seen being most crucial to the nation, these critical infrastructure, by virtue of their interdependence across sectors and the potential for cascading sequences to other critical infrastructure and sectors if disrupted. So the legislation has several security obligations. For instance, certain organizations are required to report cyber incidents to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre that impact the delivery of essential services. That's exactly what has happened 2 days ago when ACSC went and asked, but they are not, or even though they are exempted, because it affected 10 million Australian citizens. I think Australian Cybersecurity Centre and ASD got involved in the recent days. The enhanced cybersecurity obligations include developing cybersecurity incident response plans, undertaking cybersecurity exercises, undertaking assessment to identify the vulnerabilities for remediation, providing system information and to develop and maintain a near real-time threat picture. There are lots and lots of clauses associated with this bill, which was passed in 2020. So 5G networks is part of this critical infrastructure. And when we think of 5G, typically, they offer more speeds, but they are much more than that. They introduce greater capacity, reduced latency, more flexible delivery. They enable organizations to provide richer content, more real-time transactions, and better user experiences. So when you combine 5G with smart IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, the impact of 5G on businesses can be transformational. Let me just highlight a couple of issues here. 5G is a whole complicated area. I'll just highlight two things. First, 5G can help to create edge-based networks that can share and process information locally. For instance, IoT devices can track other devices, users, monitor inventory, gather and use it all locally, gather user device information and provide real-time data, and then share it with cloud. Not only do it locally, but also share it with the cloud, because with the edges doing the local sharing and identifying, and then connected with the cloud. So they can affect everything from software application development to manufacturing flows to managing resources in highly connected environments such as smart cities. So if you have connected cars, for instance, communication between cars on infrastructure-based Internet of Things, IoT can enable improved traffic management and augment autonomous driving. So it pretty much permeates lots of things in what happens in society. Such connected environments have serious consequences for cybersecurity, needless to say. The biggest challenge is the dramatic growth in the attack surface due to the rapid expansion of IoT devices. We've got about billions of devices being connected to the internet, right? Any device can become the weakest link in the security chain and expose the entire enterprise or organization to risk. So addressing this challenge will require some fundamental shift in thinking about how we actually think about cybersecurity. Because, for instance, let's say I want to patch billions of devices, right, using what we do with our software systems, but these devices are actually a few dollars each. Where is the incentive for the manufacturers to send you patches over the next 2 years if it costs $2 to manufacture the device? But the device is part of your ecosystem, and if it goes wrong, it affects somebody else in the system. So 5G poses lots of scalability and large-scale problems. Another paradigm shift, which is happening in the second aspect, is what we call network slice in 5G. And this is an important concept. That's why I got this slide here. Network slices are logical virtual networks on top of a common infrastructure consisting of virtual functions, VNF, or virtual network functions, which are basically software components. I'll give an example in a minute. The novelty in 5G arises in the ability to create dynamically these slices on demand and flexible enough to simultaneously accommodate multiple customers or tenants with their different business-driven requirements, all operating over a common infrastructure. So we have a common infrastructure underneath the hardware infrastructure, these VNF or software components. We use those software components to create these slices. These slices are provided as services to healthcare, to financial. I'll give you an example in a minute. So for instance, consider a 5G infrastructure with a network provider offering 3 network slices, one to healthcare industry, which provides emergency services, another to automation industry for automate services in the utility industry, and third one provides tourist guide service to city council. So emergency slice needs to be reliable and trustworthy to ensure timely transport of patients to hospitals, because untrustworthy network services in the network slice of the emergency service will lead to patients not being taken to the hospital at the right time, which could have dramatic, significant adverse consequences for the patients. industrial automation slice, if malware attacks that, the whole city can go on a blackout, for instance, for the utility. Whereas the tourist slice, there are no stringent constraints, but still we might want them to be accurate and available. So when we have these different slices, but they are all running over the same infrastructure, these slices are being used by different hospitals, different city councils, or different utility industries. You can see that if one of these a software component had malicious component in it or was put at a bad thing, it would affect multiple services and multiple customers, users. So this is although on the one hand it gives you the flexibility and provide all these services, cybersecurity is extremely critical for 5G and beyond 5G, 6G. Nowadays we are talking about 6G. Now I want to move to the second topic of AI and cyber. AI technologies impact both sides of the coin, so to speak, when it comes to cyber. That is, both attackers and defenders can benefit from AI technologies. Let me highlight just a couple of aspects here again. Incidentally, when I say AI, I only mean machine learning because that is the primary thing which is of interest for today's talk. So in a nutshell, machine learning has got three components: a decision process, an error function, and a model optimization process. What is a decision process? Based on some input data, algorithm will produce an estimate about a pattern in the data. Usually it will predict something or it will classify something. Usually those are the two things AIs often do. Then there's this error function which says, okay, I have done this prediction, and if I know some known samples, then I can compare my prediction with the known examples and say what is the error. Okay, it can help to assess the accuracy of my model. That's the error function. And the third thing is the optimization process. And basically what does is actually makes the model fit better the data. So if the model can fit better the data, then the weights of the model can be adjusted, right, and optimized, and we repeat this process, automate this, so that the accuracy, we get the desired level of accuracy. I'll give you another example in a minute. So the key thing about machine learning is the system actually learns. Based on the input data, it adjusts the weights of the model and it learns the patterns in the input data. That's all it is. It's not anymore. At one level, that's all it is. It's not that complicated. But how it does it could be very complicated indeed. Yeah? So we have different types of learning. We call supervised learning, where we know this is good data, this is bad data, this is a dog, this is a cat. I show pictures of a cat. Then the algorithm learns this is a cat. I show pictures of the dog. It learns it's actually a dog. So, but we know this, this is a cat and this is a dog. This is a good data that. So that is called supervised learning. Yep. And once we have learned, we can use it. So for instance, in this one, the typical neural network is an example of machine learning. So we keep showing pictures of lion, and this algorithm, this thing learns it's a lion. And we may show a picture of, how do I know it is a lion? Because where I've labeled lion, the light comes up. The rest of it there's no light. So in other words, this algorithm says it looks like a lion. Okay. So we have used these systems for many years. In security, actually in 2000, we started using these types of systems. And probably the most well-known system those days was SPAM. And nowadays, we use it heavily in the area of malware detection, detecting whether software is malicious, whether it is a phishing email, whether it is ransomware, and also whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, good application, bad application, good service, bad service. So in principle, it can help both the attackers as well as the defenders, because with the attackers, it can help to focus on the vulnerabilities of these algorithms, right, while helping the defenders to better detect, say, malicious guys, malicious software agents. In my view, at present, defense is in a weaker position than offense due to the various factors I alluded to earlier, the diversity of the attackers advantages, and so on. So in that sense, AI can provide help to improve the defense capabilities. I believe it will be useful, and it is useful for correcting some of the imbalance between the attackers and defenders. Another important area we call in machine learning is adversarial machine learning. And this is very interesting. Look, what is happening here is basically the algorithm learns this is a bus, right? And this algorithm learns this is a bus. But then when we add a little bit of noise to this picture, for humans, it looks like a bus. But the algorithms thinks it's some sort of an ostrich or an emu or some bird, right? So, and this is often used by, this is the way the attackers use this is the way they manipulate, they perturb the input data to the algorithm and to get a wrong result. And this is called adversarial machine learning. Yeah. So we need to make sure these algorithms are trustworthy in the sense that they are telling the right answers to us. But even more than that, we need to know not just what the decision of the algorithm, but why the algorithm made that decision. And that's very, indeed, more difficult because of the complexity of the algorithm. And that's where the current state of the art is. Yeah? Another area from security point of view, which is very interesting, is what we call generative adversarial networks. So what this is about, they try to discover and learn patterns in the input data in such a way that I try to mimic the real example. So for instance, what this is doing is, I have a real example of a lion, for instance, from a data set. I start off with some random thing, and this model generates some example, it may not look like very much a lion to begin with, it may be just noise, and I compare this, and then I feed back this, and I keep improving my model such that this output I get is exactly same as this, at least same as probability distribution saying. For instance, if I were to show you these two examples of Brad Pitt, one is real, one is generated by AI, right? And this is the technique they used is just this. Yeah? So they generated the sample, they kept comparing it, and this basically reduced the difference between the two. And then, so this is the technique which is used for deep fakes and images and videos. Yeah. So, and the current state of the art here is, they are able to do images and videos and of course some of the audios, and with the synchronization of this. So you might have seen Tom Cruise speaking something or Obama saying something which were not all deep fakes. Yeah. So actually, let me get this right. The one in the left is real, and the right one is machine generated. One in the left. Yeah, that one is real, and the right is right. This is real, and that is machine generated. As you can see, they are pretty close. So with these types of technology, as Roy Amara once said, how technologies develop is very difficult to predict. Why we tend to often overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. This leads me nicely to the next area. There are a lot of technical work in this research, to the third aspect, which is to be autonomous systems, because this type of learning is critical in autonomous systems. What is an autonomous system? An autonomous system is a collection of distributed entities. They are working together to perform a common task, achieve certain set of goals. They do a multitude of tasks to achieve certain set of overall system goals. This could be a set of drones interacting with each other in a dynamic, contested environment. And autonomy can be partial in the sense we will have human in the loop. There is some degree of human involvement. But this is what in the defense environment that is typically the case, which is often preferred. We need such systems to be secure, trustworthy, and of course resilient. They need to be resilient to inadvertent system failures, such as bugs and misconfiguration. They need to be secure against malicious system failures and cyber attacks, both within the system as well as from outside the system. And the decisions and actions they take need to be trustworthy, and they need to learn from their actions. So these autonomous systems need security mechanisms to detect and counteract attacks, to determine which agents are friends, which are foes, so that they can collaborate with the friends. They need to collect data in an accurate and reliable manner and take decisions based on that data, and keep a record of these decisions and learn from the decisions, and then learn from the decision in terms of the quality of the decisions and the consequences of the actions that they have taken, and then they can adjust their model. So we have, when we think of autonomous agent, a system, we think of an agent being something like that. It has a model of the real world. It understands, tries to get the current state. It learns, it senses the current environment, and it creates a dynamic knowledge. It has a set of goals being specified prior to or dynamically changed, and it gives an actions history and dynamically updates, and it interacts with other agents, and it might interact with the human, and it may also interact with the command and control center. This is the type of agents we have, whether it is in a drone or whether it is in, and that's an area of very much of interest for us, where we developing this security and trustworthy mechanism, the red layer, the assurance. Oh, so I went. Now, final area for me is space systems, and as I said, with the increasing commercialization and militarization of space, space is going to be increasingly an attractive target. In fact, most of the world's terrestrial communications infrastructure, critical infrastructures like communications, financial services, transport, logistics, they are all dependent on space infrastructures. So protecting space assets is critical. Indeed, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in a press statement issued on 10th of May, pointed out that soon after it invaded Ukraine, Russia launched cyber attacks against commercial satellites, communication networks, to disrupt Ukrainian command and control. These actions had spillover effects on other European countries, among other things, disabling internet services to private citizens. Space systems generally consists of three segments. The space segment with satellites and space objects, ground segment, which has got the command control, user networks, customer networks, and the link segment, which connects the two. And all of these are exposed to cyber attacks. Compromising the ground station infrastructure is probably the easiest way to attack space systems, as the ground systems provide the software and the hardware to legitimately control and track space objects such as satellites. And attacks here are very similar to enterprise, attacks on the enterprise infrastructures. A common threat is introduction of malware into the software so that the satellite up there behaves erratically or does something which you didn't want it to do. So the Treloar attack, Treloar is an advanced persistent threat Russian group. There are several such groups. This is one of them. So this attack on satellite internet provider enabled the attacker to steal IP addresses. So what that means is the attacker uses the IP address and to send information, false information to, say, drones or other satellites. Now, why the attacker is able to do that is because it steals the address, but that is only detectable when the address is being used simultaneously by the legitimate user and the attacker, which often may not happen. So this attack remained stealthy for a long period of time. Yeah? In space segments, space objects are vulnerable to many malicious intrusion commands, like as well as malicious malicious loading of payload and attacks such as denial of service attacks, which are quite common, at least in the enterprise system. So these can be replicated. I mean, today we had NASA Live. I was just watching it before I came here. We actually sent something to deflect the asteroid, so that this is as a protection mechanism in the future. If some asteroid was to hit the Earth, we have technology to be able to divert it. So, but these, I was thinking these types of things can equally be, it's like a butter knife. When you give a knife, you can butter the toast on the one hand, and you can also have other actions. So these types of actions, they're all, it's a dual technology, what we commonly refer to us. Right, in the set of, in the case of satellites, there are many satellites which are currently operational that use very old technologies which have no security functionality at all, so they can be easily attacked. With the link segment, the most common threat is communication channels, is that of jamming. So GPS jammers are very, very common, and they override or distort the GPS satellite signals, and GPS jammers are very cheap, hundreds of dollars to purchase, so they even for less sophisticated state and commercial malicious actors. GPS spoofing, which is a little bit more serious than GPS jamming, it involves the manipulation of the GPS signal. So it is what it means is for the user, it appears that the GPS is working, but it is being spoofed. So it is being spoofed means that the attacker takes control of the uplink or the downlink channel, so he injects false data. That means the satellites or the space objects do take action on board or do some things which leads to unexpected behavior, but also destruction of other space objects or self-destruction, so on. So the intention of alteration of data communicated of the channels cause catastrophic effect on the spacecraft. So in the near term, all these attacks will likely remain, coming not only from state actors, but also from well-resourced non-state actors, as more and more communications capabilities come online via space. So another major area of concern from my side is the supply chain vulnerabilities. The specialized components needed for space assets are not all developed by a single manufacturer. In fact, to keep the cost down, space organizations often purchase components from catalogs of approved vendors around the world. And the approval process for these vendors does not necessarily include cybersecurity vetting standards. So when a space organization purchases a component from a vendor, for instance, it has little control over the code written by a software developer of that component. This lack of insight introduces considerable security risk. Furthermore, not dissimilar to industrial control systems, space assets are built to last. And because they are functional in the field of because they are functional in the field for longer periods and are mission critical, system downtime is not usually an option. This makes space assets difficult, if not impossible, to patch for security flaws, even when they are discovered. Then there are new emerging services, and this started happening in 2018. So, for instance, you might, if you're using Amazon Web Services, Amazon has a thing called AWS Ground Station. It is a fully managed service that allows users to control satellite communications, process data, and carry out operation from their desktops and laptops without requiring traditional ground infrastructure such as the space agency. This implies that such services can be accessed by user anywhere from the world. Therefore, clearly there are several security issues here, whether controlling the actions of the users not uploading malicious data, malicious code, infecting space systems, and as well as preventing attacks such as denial of service attack. Another emerging technology, why I put the network slice there, previously when I talked about 5G, and this is relevant for space. Another emerging technology in space, what is called softwarization of space systems. And this softwarization of space systems uses network slices, NFV, SDN, the network function virtualization. On the one hand, these technologies will make space systems more flexible so that the satellites are made to last more. They can, on demand, their functionalities can be changed. Okay, because that is useful because, given I put one satellite, this costs a certain amount of money, I can dynamically change the functionality to change my requirement, as my requirements change. That is a very useful thing. On the other hand, it also introduces new security challenges. When security functionalities are dynamically changed up there's a need to ensure that they are trustworthy and their sophisticated attacks cannot happen. It is clear that mitigating such threats in space require not only technological solutions, but also a policy framework that can guide the technology's efforts. For instance, with the increasing reliance of the space sector on commercial technologies and the use of commercial off-the-shelf component, it is critical policy should be established to enforce strict cybersecurity requirements for all components of space systems and their supply chains. Cybersecurity skills are another important piece in this policy framework. A major challenge in securing space systems, in my view, is the systems of systems aspects, requiring a deep understanding of how such systems work and the various threats and opportunities it presents to the attacker. So with space systems, not only we need expertise and experience in computing systems and infrastructure, but also we need experience and knowledge of specialized space infrastructure such as ground control stations and satellites. So the policy framework should identify specific steps in developing professionals who have capabilities and expertise in both these areas. So before moving to the final part of my concluding part, let me just share with you one slide as to what we do, types of areas that we are involved in at Newcastle. So these are some of these. So some of these names are touched upon at a higher level. So we look at cloud systems, Internet of Things, big data, the three areas which is of interest to us. In the big data, machine learning is of interest, and machine learning is used for malware and software detection. And in the industrial control systems, how computing and control systems can come together, and the autonomous systems uses things like network function virtualization, machine learning, and data center. I didn't talk about this part here today, but data centric and data privacy is also of an interest. So these are some of the areas we do in our center. Now let me, just the last few minutes. So I would like to conclude by returning to the strategic level and consider where cybersecurity initiatives, activities from other initiatives such as Quad can be leveraged into AUKUS. Cyber skills is one area where there is a significant shortage of talent. It's estimated that there are some 3 million cybersecurity professionals will be needed throughout the world by late 2020s. I think the figure is between 2.5 to 3 nowadays, right now. So in Australia, this figure is about 25,000. I think recently there was a report which came out of the Cyber CX, I think last week or week before, which said there will be a gap of about 25,000 in the next 2 years. The gap, what we need and we are generating in terms of graduates and professionals coming out of the educational sector. So there's a great opportunity to enhance cooperation in the cyber skills area and synchronize some of the activities in education research in cybersecurity between the Quad and AUKUS. For instance, mutual recognition of some specific educational programs in cybersecurity is a good step. In fact, mutual recognition of security assessments like IRAP, InfoSec Registered Assessors Program, and security standards for procurement of software across AUKUS and Quad countries will enable companies that pass security assessments in one country to sell into the partners' markets. On the technology side, there are some lower-hanging fruits, such as the agreements on the next stages of 5G and 6G. Another area which comes to my mind is the establishment of a framework for identifying and fact-checking monitoring system targeted at cyber threats. And that is because there are lots of threats there, and we need to be able to monitor, fact-check, and prioritize, and which will be beneficial for both Quad and AUKUS. Another area is of interest, I think should be considered, is establishing government agreements between the partners in the tracking down of cyber criminals. This will put pressure on financial entities, enabling them to operate, as well as provide increased transparency. This will also help with the attribution of malicious actors and cyber-related sanctions. Then, of course, there's the conducting of joint cyber exercises with the partners of Quad and AUKUS to improve interoperability and resilience, which was one of the key goals of the AUKUS from the Prime Minister. And another area that should be explored is in the context of foreign policy related to foreign aid. There can be coordination of policies with respect to foreign aid resources in cyber and technology capacity building in the region. This will be a dual benefit, one providing for the economies and resilience of our regional partners, as well as our own security. So, in conclusion, cyber poses challenges which can only be met through close alignment and cooperation amongst major powers. Initiatives such as AUKUS and Quad provide ideal channels for Australia to enhance cooperation and collaboration in cyber, in particular in enhancing cyber capabilities through sharing of expertise, investment in skills, enabling the partners to develop and exchange advanced technologies, and strengthen our interoperability and resilience. In fact, for AUKUS to be successful, I believe it needs to play a significant role in areas such as secure supply chain, interoperable security standards, as well as skills, which are particularly relevant and which require urgent consideration for cyber technologies in defense and space. More generally, we are seeing an increasing focus of cybersecurity in the boardrooms of US, UK, and Australian organizations in both public and private sectors. Alliances like AUKUS can have a positive influence on such boardrooms, when every executive team will need to assess cyber risk and understand mitigation opportunities offered by technologies such as AI, autonomous systems, and cloud. For this to happen, in my view, there is a need to bring the commercial industry along in shaping the AUKUS initiative. And I think this is something I hope the initiative will look into a bit more, take that into consideration in the next. I know we've had just the first anniversary of this AUKUS initiative, I think last week. So with that, let me conclude, and once again, thank you for this up.
Thank you, Professor Varadharajan, for a most enlightening presentation today on the important subject of the role AUKUS is to play in the Indo-Pacific region in relation to cybersecurity. No doubt many attending today will have been struck by the strange synchronicity of your being the speaker when the whole issue of cybersecurity has been headline news in the past week following the widely publicised cyber attack on a major telco. Your outstanding career has been studded with achievements on a global scale, too numerous to list here. The concepts involved in cybersecurity and breaches of that security are a mystery to most of us, or many of us, to this speaker in any case. We are fortunate indeed to have had the benefit of hearing today a synthesis of your vast experience and expertise applied to a specific area of cybersecurity highly relevant to this part of the world. Again, our most sincere thanks for coming along today and addressing us.
Let me very quickly conclude by thanking everyone for being with us. I'd like to just show you a prefix of what's coming. Next month we have another exposition, meaning another explanation of AUKUS agreement. Brigadier Hayden Cole developing a sovereign guided weapons capability. Some of you may or may not know that the Orchard Hills ex-RAF base, or RAF base on the Northern Road, is in fact a designated production point for our capability. And it's very local in the sense of that particular one. We're having our AGM, so if any of you are interested in nominating for the board, this is the appropriate time, please, to do that. Our major seminar is on the 22nd of November. Our patron, Her Excellency the Governor, will be opening the seminar, and our forces commanders, fleet commander, etc., have agreed to present. The fleet commander has committed to be here to give you a briefing on the Australian fleet in action this year, and I'd commend that particular one to you. We're rounding off in December with the year in review. Very well known Mr. Paul Kelly, the editor of The Australian, will be speaking about the year in review. We'd invite you to join us for our Christmas luncheon the next day at the Castlereagh Hotel. We'd like to basically, at any time, welcome your support. And as we finish, I'd like to just simply say, one of the things that RUSI is doing at the moment is there is an electronic ability to give your support to a condolence message from RUSI to the Windsor royal family, and there is a physical condolence book over with Greg at the moment if you'd like to sign on the way out. I'm not quite sure why that's flicking through, and I'd like to just give a couple of very quick final thank yous. Firstly, thank you to our two key people, Vijay and Sir. Welcome and thanks again. Could I also identify that we have with us Colonel Joe Matthews, who's the editor of United Service. It's a very high quality journal. Joe, pleasure to have you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for editing our journal. And finally, could I thank all of you for being with us today. And I, with great pleasure, like to conclude. Thank you for supporting us. That's the end of our function today.